So at a time when the English language has become one of the most important languages in the industry, and it has become incredibly difficult to even undertake basic transactions online without having a good background in English. Not to mention, academically speaking, if you're thinking of doing some research, or maybe you're just looking for answers to any problems that you may have, you may need some guidance from one of those Indian teachers who explain incredibly many of the concepts. And of course, these will be in English, at least most of them. I do remember cases in which I was having problems with certain topics in college when it would have been better if I wouldn't have known Hindi, not English actually. But still, English is incredibly useful now. And it is a requirement to enter many universities and sometimes to get residency permits and jobs. And therefore, if you would like access to these opportunities, you do need to present a certificate. That can be a TOEFL certificate or an IELTS certificate. And depending on your local currency and local economy, these are very expensive exams sometimes. So we oftentimes don't have the opportunity to take them multiple times. Because while in some countries, the price for this exam can be around 10% of the average wage, whereas in other countries, this can cost almost 300% the average wage in that country. And unfortunately, the prices are pretty much the exact same all over the world. So it is important to be well prepared. And to do that, you don't really need to go to any expensive course. But before we get into that, we must talk about the basics of the exam and what are the things that we need to focus on the most to score the best. And the exam is graded with a grade from around 0 to 9. And most institutions won't really accept anything under 6. But in some rare circumstances, you might be able to get away with a 5.5. But generally speaking, a grade above 6.5 is usually required. And the grade that you obtain will depend on 4 parts. We have the listening part, reading part, the writing part, and the speaking part. So this part will consist of around 4 different recordings, and these will oftentimes have different accents. And one of the biggest issues that people face is often just their stress. Oftentimes, when listening to other people speaking in a different language, the fact that we can't go back and forth can often scare a lot of people. So if you just stay calm and take a breath, you can have a major advantage relative to your peers. And understand that if everyone else, say, scores terribly, this will, in a sense, affect the grades, as in the grades can be slightly modified in order to account for the difficulty of this exam. So even though it's not at all a curve type exam, there could be slight curving in a sense. So the important thing is to just remain calm and understand the basic context, because a lot of the times, if you just understand the basic ideas behind it, you can start to build up on that. And even if you have not really heard what they said, you might be able to recreate an equally good example in your head. But fortunately, in the second part, you won't have to use your imagination that much, in a sense, because the second part is the reading part. And here you will come across the text yourself, and you can go through it as many times as you'd like, but you shouldn't really take advantage of it that much because you won't have that much time. Instead, once again, you should apply a concept similar to what we discussed in the listening. As in, once again, you want to skim over it and maybe not focus on answering the questions sequentially. So if you find that the answer to, say, the 20th question just popped up right in front of you, you're like, yeah, that's the answer, then maybe you should go for that first, rather than trying to read the entire text first. Because a lot of the times, as you're answering these questions in this different order, you will also have an idea and you will have a story building up inside of your head. And this will help you to intuitively guess what the rest of the story is saying. However, do not rely on that too much, because there will be the true and false and not given type questions. And this is a part where many people get confused, because it's hard enough trying to guess or really understand whether something is true or false. Trying to understand whether or not a certain piece of information is given or not given is a whole new level. So please do be careful, because this part is a great opportunity to score very well. And generally speaking, it is quite possible with enough practice to score incredibly well in both the reading and listening parts, because the next part is the more challenging part, and it is the writing part. Because yes, by understanding concepts and ideas, you can score slightly better at this part, but you do need guidance. This is the part where tutoring does become, in a sense, necessary, because you need someone to truly be able to critically analyze your text and tell you what you can do to improve it. But if you are working entirely on your own, something that you can do in this part is focus more on, rather than using simple short sentences, or even if you have written simple short sentences, find ways to use linking words or any other form to complexly maybe combine them together. And many students have seen that it has had amazing positive impacts on their grades. Not to mention the ability to sometimes use different sorts of vocab, because remember, the English language is a combination of so many other languages in the world, and each of these languages' vocab has remained in the language, as in you will often find so many different synonyms that mean the exact same thing, because each of them has a different root. So you may find that there is something in your native tongue that is equally well represented in English. So the key, once again, is just to be calm and try to be as creative as you possibly can. And calmness is, of course, key to succeeding in the next part, which is the speaking part. And you don't always have to use complex sentences. You can sometimes use simple ones as well. It's just important to have a variety. And of course, an incredibly important thing to note is that when it comes to speaking, oftentimes people will use informal vocabulary, and that is something that you really must do your best to avoid. Just be calm, be creative, and if possible, try to be very formal. And keep in mind that even if you don't really do so well in one of those parts, you can definitely make it up in the other parts. But yes, you have to keep in mind that the mistakes are slightly expensive, as in each part is actually graded out of 40, as in that's the raw score, and it will finally be made into a score out of 9. And for every around an average of, say, 3 points, you would lose half a mark on the 9 scale. And that would mean that if you are, say, going for a score of 6.5, let's say, then by no means can you lose more than 13 marks. And I'm not talking about in total, but rather in every part on average. So let's say you lost perhaps 16 marks in one part, then in the next part you must make it up and not lose more than 10 marks. But of course, what I've told you today is by no means sufficient for you to enter the exam, of course, in any way whatsoever. You do need some other sort of program to help you, but as I said, you do not need a paid program. So if you are thinking of taking the IELTS exam, I would strongly recommend that you take the course offered by the University of Queensland. And that is an extremely well-structured course that is free, and you can find a link to the course in the description box down below. In addition to Magoosh, I will just write its name also in the description box. And this you can find on most app stores and Google Play stores. And this is a great application just to build a vocab. Nothing else. It's just a great way to build your vocabulary for the exam. Even though it might have other features right now, this is really the most popular feature of this program. And of course, if you are trying to learn English and pass this IELTS exam for a university degree, then I would strongly recommend that you also check out the scholarship playlist. And there you can get access to amazing degrees all over the world, and oftentimes fully funded. That means including even living expenses. Or if you're more interested about learning things just online, you can check out my online courses playlist. And if you have any questions, please just let me know in the comments down below.